Hello everyone, happy Monday. This is Jake, your resident content cowboy here. Yahoo! Yeehaw! Dang! And it's Monday. You know what that means. I don't want to say it because I can handle it on my own. Other Jake, I've realized that I'm becoming more powerful by the day. Jake 4 doesn't need any of the other Jakes anymore. You're dismissed. What do I do? Whatever it is, remember this. I don't care. I hope someone stops you one day. What was that? Nothing. I said I hope someone stocks shoes one day. Oh, good. Me too. It's tier list time, baby, and I wanted to do one that I've been thinking about for a little while now, and it's what Pokemon are best late game. Obviously, there are some Pokemon that really turn on the further the match goes, and I wanted to highlight them today because sometimes they don't get a lot of shine, given that they have some trouble getting there throughout the game. Let's head on over to the tier list. All right, here are our categories for today, our tiers, if you will. We have late game monsters at the top, strong late games right below that, kinda late games below that, not so good late game below that, and B tier. Still got B tier in there. Just slightly shifted everything over. I realized you couldn't see everybody. So let's take a look at our roster here. Where should we start? Let's start with something strong. You know, let's start with Gardevoir. Gardevoir is a really interesting Pokemon because it's very, very powerful, but it takes a long time to come online. Its only issue is that its laning phase is kind of weak. If you put it in the jungle, you're taking jungle away from someone else. But once it does get to a late game moment, it is insane. If it hits its Unite move, it can be a full team KO. So Gardevoir is one of those Pokemon that really, really shines in the late game. This category was almost made for Pokemon like this. It's probably one of the most monstrous late game Pokemon in the game, honestly. I would say it is an absolute monster late game. I feel like I see it used from time to time in higher ranks. I've played against some really, really good ones. It just needs time to get going. But once it gets going, it's really, really amazing. Let's go with someone who has not so good of a late game. Absol. So this is one of the complaints that I often have about Absol, is that Absol is really solid early and mid game, and if you get some ganks with Absol, you're cruising right along. You can get a lot of experience with Absol and do well. The only problem is, as you start to progress throughout the match, it's a little disappointing to be using Absol because all that experience went to someone who isn't super powerful later in the match. It's kind of the unfortunate thing that happens with a Pokemon like that. I think Absol is really good in the right hands, but because it falls off late game, it has some trouble in the meta, and that's why I think Absol has to land in the not so good late game. It doesn't have amazing crowd control. The burst damage it does, while good, it doesn't impact the team fights enough late game, because if you can't burst down some of these people, if they're able to stay alive, you're kind of just this squishy thing that popped into battle and then has to go. So I think that's why Absol is so underwhelming late. But early and mid, Absol is very, very strong. Let's do someone with a strong late game here. Okay, Alolan Ninetales. I think Alolan Ninetales is great. Its early and mid game is better probably than its late game, but its utility is always very, very useful. Freezing people, stunning people, creating its Aurora Veils. Ninetales is a good Pokemon from the beginning till the end. I think it excels early. Laning against Alolan Ninetales is such a tough lane to deal with. They can just bully you so hard, but late game it does fall off. It doesn't reach the heights of Gardevoir. It's not built like that. It's built to be really solid throughout the entire game, and that's why I think you often see it in some of the higher ranked play, because there's not a time when Alolan Ninetales isn't very useful for your team. Let's see someone who's got kind of an late game. Let's see, kind of an late game. All right, I feel like this falls into the kind of an late game, and it's Zeraora. Zeraora's pretty good, and of course, anyone that's fed and has a lot of experience is pretty useful. I like being able to hop into a team fight with Zeraora's Discharge, Gross, and doing a ton of damage, but without really any solid crowd control, without without being able to poke, without being inside the realm of combat, basically, I think it kind of falls off late game. It's not Absol falling off late game, in my opinion, but it's kind of, it's not bad. You want, obviously, it to have plenty of experience and be able to fight. It can help you really secure Zapdos in certain moments, but it really starts to fall off late. Good early, good mid, and kind of like a lot of speedsters, does happen to trickle off as you move into the late game. I don't have anyone to put into the B tier yet, but I'll think about it. I'll think about putting something inside that B tier. Let's just bounce around a little bit, huh? Okay. Eldegoss. Eldegoss, I would say, has a strong late game. It's not a late game monster, but the ability to put shields on your team, the ability to cast that tornado and hopefully create some movement speed in the encounter, also the ability to throw that pollen puff if that's what you use, pretty great. Its Unite move heals allies, which is really, really nice. The only thing I think that might knock it down a little is the fact that Blissey does a few of its abilities a little bit better. However, I think it still has a really, really strong late game, and I could see some people running Eldegoss instead of Blissey. The meta is not fully decided, but I think Blissey's a little more powerful overall, just because it works so well with what the meta has going for it right now, which are these attack damage Pokemon like Cinderace and Greninja getting really, really powerful. Also, being able to power up someone like Alolan Ninetales. It's great all around, I think Blissey is. So even though Eldegoss's late game is strong, it does get edged out by Blissey just in overall play. This is a weird one. I don't know where to put Charizard, if I'm being honest. I might put Charizard in the B tier. In some ways, Charizard is a late game monster because Charizard turns on once it gets its Unite move, and then it's very, very good. However, I would argue it still doesn't even become a monster. It's this weird thing where once Charizard gets its Unite, it's really, really great. But at the final encounters in the battle, I still don't think it's a monster. Maybe I would consider it having a strong late game because its early game is kind of weak. And then once it hits that sweet spot of Charizard, it gets pretty darn good, but it still falls off a bit. I'm not really sure where to put it right now. I think either strong late game or B tier. I'm going to let it hang out in the B tier for a moment, and I'll probably move that around. We need a B tier, and I'm not exactly sure what it represents, but it does deserve to be here. Okay, let's talk about someone with a really fun late game. You know, I might consider this Pokemon a late game monster. I think I will, and that's Venusaur. So Venusaur early, pretty good. Mid, pretty good, especially once it gets its Solar Beam. But if you get a lot of experience on a Venusaur and you're just chunking people down with those Solar Beams, Venusaur is a bit of a monster. It's not Gardevoir levels because it doesn't have a Unite move that functions as utility-wise as useful as Gardevoir's. It doesn't do as much damage, but you steal Zapdoses, you pick off everyone, you stay at a great range. Venusaur late game is so good. Even its mid game is getting really good. I love watching Venusaur lately, and it has been melting me in so many games. So I think Venusaur is a pretty solid late game monster. It probably could teeter into the strong late game only because, again, its Unite move isn't really something to write home about, but the steals, the KOs that you can pick when someone's trying to leave, I think it kind of becomes a monster late game. I really like Venusaur late game. Let's see here. Here's another one where I'm not exactly sure where to put it just because I don't know where to put this Pokemon ever, and that's Mr. Mime. You know, I was talking with another Unite YouTuber the other day. I was talking to Crashy, and I don't even know if we were recording this, but we were talking about how Mr. Mime is one of those Pokemon that's very, very good in the right hands. And once the right sort of comp or the right Pokemon comes out that kind of works with what Mr. Mime does well, Mr. Mime is going to be one of the top Pokemon in the meta. It's just kind of in between right now. Again, really good when used by good people, but it feels like there are some stronger choices. Late game, I think it's decent. I might consider it as strong late game because you can put up barriers and your Unite move can stop people from being able to do what they want to do inside of combat. I think I'm going to let it hang out in the strong late game category. It might be kind of but it's just one of those Pokemon where if it is in the right hands, you're doing some amazing stuff with Mr. Mime. So I feel like I have to leave it. I think I have to leave it in strong late game. It's definitely not a late game monster by any means, but I think it's really, really solid for your team as the game goes on. Let's talk Snorlax. Snorlax is good early. Snorlax is good mid. Snorlax is good late. Snorlax is good in a box with a fox with some socks. This game only gives me socks. This game gives me socks. Snorlax is good all the time. All the time. Anytime's a good time with Snorlax. Would I consider it a monster? I don't think it teeters into the monster category for me, although it kind of is a monster the entire game, if I'm being honest. I'll put it in the strong late game category, maybe one of the strongest late game categories. Snorlax is always good. You're laning with a Snorlax, it's good. You are fighting at a team fight for Dreadnought, Rotom, it's good. Snorlax is always good. Block and Heavy Slam are always, always, always useful. It's just kind of a monster overall in its kit, but there's nothing that happens to it late game that I feel like starts to make it even better. It's just always great. So I would consider it having a strong late game. You could probably even put it into the monster category if we're being honest here. Let's take a look at Gengar. Gengar is someone who I feel like with a lot of the speedsters, and this is why I think speedsters have trouble in the meta, is probably a kind of late game. It's not that great. You don't get that much benefit out of having it at that Zapdos team fight. It can solo, some Pokemon pretty well, which is nice. If you get some picks, it's pretty good. I see a lot of people running Shadow Ball right now, and they're doing a ton of damage, but you're still insanely squishy. You don't have you've got good mobility, but I don't know. I just feel like late, every time there's a Gengar late game, you just pick them off really quick. They're not too hard to deal with. So I feel like they kind of fall off late game, and I'd say they're kind of an late game Pokemon. Here's someone who, I hate to say it, one of my favorites in the game, Pikachu. I think Pikachu probably falls into the not so good late game category, and it breaks my heart really, because that's Pikachu's only issue. Early and mid, Pikachu is so fun, so good. You're picking people off with its sure hits. You're stunning people. The problem is its Unite move is never that good. You kind of want to use its Unite move right when you get it, because it's never going to get any better than early. Later, the cooldowns are just slightly too long, I think, on the moves for these big final encounters. You're not doing enough damage. You don't have enough crowd control. And I feel like Pikachu's Achilles heel, if you will, is its late game. It's the thing holding Pikachu back, I think, from being in the meta. You make Pikachu stronger late game, you fix this little bit of Pikachu, maybe even just buffing its Unite move kind of considerably here, Pikachu could rise in the meta. It's one of my favorite characters to play, but I think its late game is pretty darn weak. Probably better than Absol's, though. Well, I don't know. It's a pretty darn weak late game. Let's be honest. Let's see here. Someone else. You know what? Wigglytuff. Wigglytuff is good early, good mid, good late, a great support character. In some ways, because of its utility with Zapdos and the Dreadnought debuff, and because of how important it could be in that final team fight to have all those shields and to get rid of all that CC, I actually kind of think it's a late game monster. I think one move by it, its Unite move, can change the game in multiple ways. A lot of Pokemon have some really good Unite moves. For instance, Venusaur or Cinderace or someone like that, they have some pretty good opportunities to steal Zapdos. So there are some positive aspects of a lot of these Pokemon here, but Wigglytuff's Unite move can cleanse the Dreadnought buff. Right there, you could take Dreadnought 1 second before Zapdos and cleanse your entire team of it. Also, you can just use that buff in that big team fight, and the enemy team kind of has to back out for a second because it's just so much in the form of shields and in the form of reducing crowd control effects. I think Wigglytuff is absolutely a late game monster. It shines early too. It's so fun. I'm so glad they buffed Wigglytuff. I say it too often, but I'm so glad they buffed it because it's really, really good. Cramorant. Cramorant has a strong late game, and the main reason Cramorant has a strong late game is, of course, its Unite move, which is amazing, and it helps zone out big objectives, and it's the knock up from Hurricane and Surf, basically. Its damage falls off a little bit. It's kind of like Pikachu, except its Unite move is way better, and both of its moves have crowd control effects. So I think because of that, it is a strong late game contender. It doesn't really move into the kind of late game. It's still pretty darn good, and its Unite move can single-handedly turn, you know, the tides of something. Let's see here. Now, I'm not sure what to do with these two. I'm going to bring both of these Pokemon up right now. Cinderace and Greninja. Cinderace and Greninja are both essentially late-game monsters, but it's because their role makes them late-game monsters. They're kind of good mid as well. They're really light early, and they're not ideal in lane. Right now, they're ideal in the jungle, because once you give them plenty of experience, they are your team's carries, and you need them to do the most damage. No one can compete with these two when it comes to essentially when it comes to damage output. I know I have Pokemon up here that become late-game monsters, but these ones are sort of set up to be your hard carries inside the game. So my thought is, do I put them as late game monsters? They kind of are. When you have a level 14 Greninja and the enemy team still has 11s and 12s on it, I mean, that's what you want as a carry. You have them in the jungle for that reason. It's a little weird though, right? In some ways, I feel like it doesn't fit the spirit of this list, but it just happens to be the truth that you need them to get a ton of experience because they become monsters. Their auto attacks are amazing. The executes are incredible from Greninja. Cinderace's Unite move helps with steals. Greninja's kind of helps with steals as well, just not as much. I think, again, it goes against the spirit of this list, but not against the rules. They are late game monsters. Okay. We need some more all-rounders here. Machamp. Machamp, I think, is solid all the time. It doesn't really fall off into the kind of I think it's always solid. Its Unite move's pretty incredible. It helps deal with the battlefield in some amazing ways with its submission. I think Machamp is strong mid-late. It doesn't become a monster, in my opinion. Of course, anything if it's overfed can kind of become a monster, but I think it's from its mid-game point, it's strong all the way till late game. It never really becomes a monster for me, but it's always really, really solid. It's probably one of the most solid mid-game Pokemon in the game right now, I would say. Talonflame. I think Talonflame... I hate doing this to all the speedsters. I just think it's something that the game needs to address, is that speedsters, they need a little help. They need some love here. So in some ways, I want to move Talon into the strong late game because there are so many Talon plays that are unique to Talon. The amount of scoring you can get out of Talon, the amount of like backdoor goaling that you can get out of someone playing Talonflame is pretty incredible. Its Unite move can push people around, but I don't know. Yeah, you can steal with it. I still think in general it becomes kind of I really like Talonflame. I like all the speedsters. I think they need to retool them a bit. They need to do something to make speedsters more viable in their role. And that might be nerfing how attackers work in the jungle or something like that. I'm not positive what the solution needs to be, but basically the issue with the speedster is you don't want to play Talonflame in the lane. Maybe you could play Gengar in the lane or something like that, but you don't really want to play the speedsters in the lane that much. You want to play the speedsters in the jungle. However, you kind of need to give the jungle to these other people. So, I don't know. Would you rather have a level 14 Gardevoir or a level 14 Talonflame? I guess I could say 15. That's the cap. But you know what I'm saying? That's kind of what happens here. And I think the speedsters all hang out in this whatever realm. This one teeters into strong, again, because of strategy. But you'd have to be really solid with Talon, and you'd also have to have a team that's cool with you playing that way so that you could get a bunch of points. Because you could still get a bunch of points with Talon. Nobody knows what you're doing. Your team loses Zapdos, and then it's over. All right. Let's see. Lucario. Lucario's good all the time. I actually think Lucario, it does suffer slightly late game, but Lucario's good all the time. It's another one like Snorlax. It's just good all the time. Lucario's always good. I worry that it's going to get a little bit of a nerf soon, but Lucario is just good all the time. Great Pokemon to have around. Strong late game. It falls off a little, but not too much. It's still really, really strong in the late game. It executes early and it executes late. I mean, it can help you. In a team fight, you can get an easy few KOs with Lucario, just setting up the right positioning for it. So it shuts things down. Really strong late game. Not a monster by any means, but really, really strong. What do I do with Crustle and Slowbro? So Slowbro, I think, very similar to Snorlax, is a strong late game Pokemon. Its ability to pick up an enemy carry with both of its telekinesis moves, pretty legitimate. And its Surf, really good in a team fight. I move this Pokemon into strong late game. That's what I think about it. Crustle's weird. I feel like I have to do this, but I have to say it's a late game monster. Is it as useful as Snorlax? Still probably not. But for the sake of this list, some of the things that you can do with Crustle near the end of the game are kind of mean. You just have the ability to sort of dunk on them multiple times. You could run from goal to goal. They can't really stop you. If you are at the end of the game and you don't score 100 points with Crustle, something must be very, very wrong with what's happening in that match. Your mobility is off the charts. You can leave the Zapdos fight, score 100 points, and run right back and get back into the Zapdos fight. So I've got to say that Crustle is a late game monster. Blissey, it's good always. It's good always. Not necessarily late game. In some ways, I guess you could say it's kind of but it's not, because its ability Helping Hand is so freaking amazing. Its Unite move saves your carries. So I think it moves into the strong late game category. It doesn't particularly shine there. It shines always. It's kind of like Snorlax, but it just shines all the time. So that's where I think Blissey hangs out as far as late game is concerned. And finally, Garchomp. Garchomp is solidly B tier. It's just, no, I'm kidding you. Garchomp is a late game monster. It's right up there with Gardevoir. This is when Garchomp becomes Garchomp. You get its Unite move. You're kind of nuts. People have to run away from you. Garchomp is so freaking good. You take Zapdos out incredibly quickly. Garchomp is probably the reason that I came up with the name late game monster. It's Garchomp and Gardevoir. The Gars, if you will. Not the Gengar, but the Gars, if you will. The Gars are amazingly good late game. They're just some of the best when it comes to that. The only problem, of course, is they need a lot of experience to get there. So just because someone's a late game monster doesn't mean they're an ideal pick. And the reason for that being, you might not get that experience. People are going to want to prioritize Greninja or Cinderace over your Garchomp and Gardevoir, but if you do that, you're in a lot of trouble. You kind of need to put both Gardevoir and Garchomp in the jungle. It's a little messy right now. I think maybe they need to slightly buff their mid game, but then maybe they're just going to be too incredible because their late game is so amazingly good. And what is the B tier really for? It's for Blastoise. That's what it's really for. We're going to leave Charizard there, but B tier is for Blastoise, who's coming very, very soon, and I'm really excited. Well, it's that time of the video. That time of the video where we play around and see if we can trick anybody who just skips right to the end. Some people think it's kind of mean. I just think it's funny. I don't know. We're just messing around. It's not really a big deal. But let's see what we can make happen here. Yeah. Obviously, it's Crustle. Crustle being able to move across the map as fast as it does. If you have Crustle on your team, you're scoring 300 points using Crustle alone. You just have to use the strategy where you, as an ally, need to get KO'd. So you leave that AL synergy on the ground, and then Crustle runs back and forth. You're basically doing a relay race with Crustle, where you're getting KO'd, it's picking up your AL synergy, running it to a goal. KO, run, KO, run, KO, run. And hopefully, using that formula we talked about earlier, you can stagger your KO timers so that you are able to defend against your enemies. Machamp is a late game monster, not because of its Unite move, but because of its Cross Chop. Just being able to do a crit late game, that is probably the reason it's so good. Zeraora, they don't talk about this, but its late game Wild Charge, not its Discharge, gross, is without question its best move. If you're not using that on Zeraora, then yeah, you're making a big mistake right now. Pikachu's kind of but we have some strong late game contenders here, and then a lot of people winded up in the B tier this week. And if you watch the video, you know what that means. I don't have to explain the B tier to you again. So I hope you all enjoyed that video. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Make sure you're out there and you get that Blastoise. Just don't take it from me in game. I will cry hysterically. Thank you so much, and I will see you all next time. Goodbye. Mwah.